Introduction to Early American Modernism in Dance. It began as a choice to move away from the rules, structures, and ideas of the past, those belonging to other ages and other cultures, and to move towards a more individually creative theory of dance. John Martin, dance historian, has described modern dance as a point of view, being different for every decade, every country, every human who gives birth to it. New dancers of the 20th century chose to release the past, tune into the present, and totally redefine the idea of what dance is. They followed poet Ezra Pound's mandate, make it new. Hello, my name is Luana. I'm a professor in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a review for my live lectures, or of my live lectures. It is designed for my students in our curriculum. If you find value in the review, please feel free to use it in your own classes as well. As I said, this is a review for my lectures, my live lectures. We are now in point 2, factors that either contributed to or influenced the development of American modern dance from the 1870s through the 1970s. In fact, most of this particular lecture will be influential from the 1900s through the 1930-1955. 1. The first influential factor. Francois Delsart. His theories were introduced into the United States by his only protege, Steele MacKay. Steele MacKay had several students herself, Henrietta Russell, William Alger, and Genevieve Stebbins. American Delsartism allowed American white women to pay attention to their bodies and to explore their own physicality and to perform in socially acceptable venues. Delsartism related physical movement, gesture, and dramatic expression. This system had its roots in science, mysticism, and aesthetics. William Algers, a student of Delsart's student Steele MacKay, taught the spiritual aspects of Delsartism. This really did assist the puritanical tendencies of the American people towards accepting the body. Delsart's theories became an important part of theater, physical education curriculum, oration, singing, and execution. This system further legitimized the idea that it was healthy, beautiful, and moral to use the human body expressively. Francisca Boas was also promoted movement and rhythm as an aspect of human development and important education. I spoke of her in the last review. 2. Jacques-Émile Dalcroze. He was a Swiss music teacher who evolved a system called eurythmics, which established a method of teaching coordination and music and body movement. The goal was to make the rhythm a physical experience. This system was taught in the Denishan School and made a large impact on Doris Humphrey. We saw this in class. This is all I'm going to play on this particular clip, but we saw this dance in class. And if you're not in my class, you can go to YouTube and find it there. Before I leave and go on to Suzanne Pirotet, Humphrey's Air for G-String was her first dance after leaving Denishan. And while it has flavors of being derivative, it does demonstrate her developing theories of composition, one where you absolutely follow the music, not only rhythmically, but qualitatively too. Where it's a place where music and movement exist equally and have an equal effect on the work. Okay, we're back to Suzanne Pirotet, actually, I should say. She was Dalcroze's artistic, theoretical, and philosophical assistant, who, along with Nita Gorder, taught rhythmic gymnastics and improvisation based on Dalcroze theories. In 1912, she was exhausted and went to a vegetarian convalescent home. known for alternative healing modalities. And that's where she met Rudolf von Levon, who I'm going to talk about next. They fell in love. In fact, she had a child by him. But Pierrottet ended up by becoming the music teacher for Levon's student also. So in many ways, there's this cross-fertilization between Delcroix's methods and Rudolf von Levon's method. Delcroix, of course, is going to focus on the music, and Levon is going to focus on the movement. Other individuals who are going to have the same sensibility of using the music in a profound way is going to be Martha Graham. And, of course, many of the people who developed their artistic sensibilities and their choreographic sensibilities from the African American aesthetic. Because remember, from my earlier lectures in this class, Ngoma, Ngoma, where I talked about music and dance being one. They come together and they should be seen together within the dancing body. Here we see, you saw it in class actually, Nacho Duetto's multiplicity forms of silence and emptiness, and others of my students saw this as homework. Clearly an indication of movement and music moving as one, not only as the theme, but also in the compositional construction. Number 3, Rudolf von Levon, a Hungarian movement analyst, dancer, choreographer, movement theorist. He's amazing. He was one of my mentors from afar, because obviously he was long gone when I was in school, but definitely someone I highly revered. As I said, he's a dance artist, he's a theorist, he's one of the most important figures in dance in Europe, and he secures a place for dance and movement independent of music. And that's a really important part of his contribution, one actually of them. He promotes the cultivation of artistic expressiveness within ourselves. He wants the heart to come through. Again, it's very interesting that Delcroix and Levon were connected through Suzanne, theoretically. In 1909, he worked with Heidi Zinkowska in Ostradance, or movement arts. In 1928, he developed Levon notation with Anne Hutchinson Guest. In 1945, he developed effort shape. Actually, this isn't effort shape. This is a Levon analysis score. I think it's 3 epitaphs, actually. So in 1945, he developed effort shape, which is a way of looking at how we use energy, how we use space, time, and energy when we move. For example, this is the basic Levon effort graph. There's also a shaping graph or a directional graph, how you shape movements. You can gather, you can scatter, things like that. But if we wanted to describe how someone used the energy and how they use time and how they use space, you could use this graph. For example, if you're going to punch something, you would draw only this aspect of the graph. This is a punch in the Levon effort graph. And remember, in class, we held on to our pens, and then we released a little bit of energy in holding our pens, and we noticed that the pen didn't move. Well, that's an example also of Levon's work. He would call that shadow movement that is not necessary. For example, the amount of energy you use to hold the pen prior to me saying, let go of a little bit of energy, but still hold your pen, he would call that shadow movement or wasted movement, wasted energy, or wasted time. Probably if he saw me talking and I constantly move my arms, he would say I have tons of shadow movement in my speaking vocabulary. Okay, number 4. This is the rise in physical culture and expression. I love this picture. I mean, look at this nun. She is using her back beautifully as she has her arms out to second position. She's teaching in the orphans in Sweden. Reaches a point in the culture in which everyone says it is good, it is healthy to move the body. Aesthetic calisthenics. Remember, Delsartism encouraged movement. Aesthetic dance, aesthetic calisthenics is a term that was used or coined by Melvin Gilbert, who was really someone who promoted school dance in the collegiate level. Others who promoted dance in colleges was Louis Chaff, Gertrude Colby Bird, Margaret Dobler. In fact, she developed the first dance major in 1926, dance as an educational tool. And she also helped to develop the educational circuit, the gymnasium circuit. Hanya Holm and Ted Shawn were advocates and toured in such venues. It's how we all toured in the beginning. When I was touring as a young modern dance student, we went from gymnasium to gymnasium. We did not have the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, the Theater Artaud. We didn't have these wonderful, beautiful spaces to perform in. Number 5. There's a post-Victorian mentality asks the question of whom and what is the individual and where do they belong. And this is going to affect a couple of different individuals. First of all, for women, there's going to be a rejection of social and sexual restraints for women. For African Americans or for Black Americans, Mexican Americans, Japanese Americans, the same question is going to be asked. Who am I in these Americas? And what do I dance about? There's going to be this self-assertive and self-defining sense toward dance. Catherine Dunham is going to have the same question as she leaves for the Caribbean to discover Africanist roots of American dance. I'll get into her later. Number 6. For centuries, there were certain mandates that required the use of dance. Either it came from an agricultural need. There was a reason why you danced, to bring the rain or to encourage a certain fertility of the land, or to bring the buffalo, or to bring food into the area, or to bless the ground. These are agricultural needs for dance. There are also ecclesiastical needs. Oh my goodness, can't believe I botched that word. Ecclesiastical needs. Demands by the church for a dance or for art, to praise a certain deity. There's also a need to meld pain into pleasure. Basically, the blues dancing, when you are hurting so deeply, but you need to transcend that. So it's a sort of a blues mandate to dance. At a certain point in history, we don't have those particular needs, but we still birth art. So there is a need to just birth art. I'm going to talk about this again when I get to number 13, but this is a very, very important part during the late 1800s, early 1900s. We saw this film in class, Paris, The Luminous Years, one of my favorite films on art. It doesn't include dance as much, but it really talks about the artistic movement going on from 1905 to 1930, which a storm of modernism swept through the art worlds of the West, uprooting centuries of tradition in the visual arts, music, theater, dance, literature, and beyond. We saw that you can't see this on YouTube, but we saw it in class, or you're going to see it in class if you haven't seen it yet in my class. So this is an important part of the feeling, the need, the rise to birth art. Number 7, access and limitations to training. During the 1930s, European American modern dancers managed to participate in and create a sustained system for training themselves as artists, training other artists, and developing a small patronage for their productions, and actually developing a small audience base. This would not be the case for many modern dancers of African American descent, leaving in many ways African American choreographers such as Hemsley Winfield, Edna Guy, DeFora, in the shadows of Martha Graham, Helen Tamers, Hanya Holm, Mary Vigman, and Humphrey and Weidman. These individuals moved to the forefront of modern dance consciousness. And unfortunately, in the 1990s, the American Dance Festival created a series that was played on PBS called Free to Dance, which corrected a lot of that incorrect sensibility that African Americans were not part, and also Spanish Americans. There was another series on that, were part of the developing theories of American modern dance. So they kind of corrected that sensibility. But that definitely affects it, the access and limitations. Number 8, Isadora Duncan will promote education, truth, aesthetics, science, intellect, the avant-garde, and feminist thinking. It will be her brand. As an artist, she carries the moral soul of a culture and of a country. She's quite the salesperson. This is a quote from someone. Here she is participating in the field of dance, which at the time was considered rank with moral damnation, and she stands above it all, saying that it is the artist who beats the true moral drum. She, like many artists of her time, were searching for natural aesthetics that were humanistically edifying, looking deep for psychological and emotional sources for movement. And I also have to say, on the side, she was very anti-jazz. I won't get into that now, or this will not be a 30-minute review. Number 9, the tours of Diaghilow's Ballet Russe in 1916 and 1917, and the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo with Colonel Wassily de Basel. Here we see, or the Americans saw during this time period, dance as modernist art, modernism in movement. The work is impressive and it's exciting. Number 10, Impressionism, late 19th century and early 20th century. Through art, the artist is defining transitory visual and emotional impressions. Individuals at the forefront of Impressionism are Claude Monet and Camille Pissarro. They were leaders of this movement. It was about the immediate and direct impression. Rather than being narrative or objective, it was more symbolic. This is a quote. We don't see the objects, we see light. Number 11, Expressionism. The conveying of strong feelings or emotions. In fact, the artist's emotions are the impetus for the work. In art, movement that stress psychological and emotional content, associated particularly with German art in the early 20th century. Here we see Expressionism, the Scream, 1893. Oh, I probably said it correctly the first time, the 19th century. Expressionism is related also to Fauvism, Dadaism, Surrealism, and conceptual art. In Expressionism, feelings can be abstracted, moved to a cosmic level by use of symbols, dance music that reflected the choreographer's own experience. Martha Graham reigned supreme in this area. Just look at her costumes, the fabric she chooses, the props, the musical choices, the characters, and how they spatially relate. Number 12, Sigmund Freud. The subjective world, really the unconscious as a generative source of behavior. And you see this also in Graham's work. I could have easily used Martha Graham's work as an example of the pressing of Freud and Jung's sensibilities into modern dance. You have to remember, her father was a psychologist. You see this work, this sensibility, subjective work, in Graham's Errand into the Maze. And Lilac Garden by Anthony Tudor. 13, Artistic Explosion. This is in some ways related to number 6 in a way, slightly different. This is Marcel Duchamp's New Descending a Staircase. Here we want to put art back into the service of the mind. Enough eye candy. And if Duchamp's The Fountain, which is a urinal put on a box on the side in 1917, isn't a statement against eye candy, I don't know what is. It's an installation piece. But there was this whole artistic explosion of what is art, and let's deconstruct art. Number 14, Native American sensibilities. Now, usually when we talk about Native American sensibilities in American modern dance. We're talking about European Americans who are drawing from First Nation tribes for inspiration. However, this book is one of my favorite books, and I think it is absolutely mandatory in any dance history class, especially of modern dance. The People Have Never Stopped Dancing by Jacqueline Shea Murphy. It's about the Native American modern dance histories, extraordinarily important. This is one of the books I consider revisionist history and extraordinarily important. And because it addresses people of nations, nation dancers and choreographers. But I will also talk about how the rhythms, the surface aesthetics, the spirituality, and the connection with self and nature of the many nation tribes really affected and influenced American modern dancers, or European American modern dancers, such as Lester Horton, Eric Hawkins, and Francisca Boas, who is known for her works with percussion, pioneering dance therapy, and using dance as a social activism. I'm going to talk about dance therapy in a little bit. Number 15, East Indian sensibilities. This is really going to come into play through the work of Ruth St. Denis. Many of the dancers in the late 1800s, early 1900s were very much drawn to the dances. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that clicked so fast. Let's go back. There we go. They were very much attracted to the spirituality of India. It was less patriarchal in its belief system, and the god was not as restrictive. And it had a place for the feminine in spirituality. So many individuals like Ruth St. Denis, Maud Allen, Loie Fuller were very much influenced by the sensibilities. Okay, 16. The construction of new performance venues with an assertion of modernity. Here we have Maud Allen, Loie Fuller, and Isadora Duncan, the whole early group that are finding other performance spaces like gardens, gymnasiums, and salons. Remember Lady Hamilton from the first review, part 1? Dancing in salons, which basically were rooms inside people's homes. 17. There is a huge impact of Theosophy, which is a particular, I don't want to say it's a religion, it's a spiritual viewpoint. It's really to unite the mysteries of the universe and the bonds that unite the universe. It is about exploring hidden knowledge and divine wisdom. And Theosophy is not alone in this kind of approach to looking at spirituality. Almost every organized religion has a mystical aspect to it. Islam has Sufism. Judaism has the Kabbalah. Christianity has the Gnostic traditions. Buddhism has the Tantric traditions. And then, there's Taoism. These religions, or these spiritualities, these ways of looking at the world from a mystical experience, really affected the early moderns. Mystics encounter a presence that transfigures their lives, transcending the confines of their limited and isolated egos, providing a portal to transcendence. It's Thomas More. I'm reading a book right now by him called A Religion of One's Own, and this quote comes from that. But you see this with the work of Martha Graham, the work of many of the early moderns, including Doris Humphrey, and her piece called The Shakers. Based on a Shaker ritual, The Shakers weaves Humphrey's fascination with the sect with her interest in formal dance and dance composition. Remember, she's the author of The Art of Making Dances. The dance portrays the shaking off of sin by celibate members of the sect who achieve a state of religious ecstasy. Mary Vigman was also part of this. She used masks to encourage an alternate awareness. Number 18. There's a change from prostitution stigma of dance to a spiritual expression. Ruth St. Denis absolutely ruled in this realm. Dance is a vehicle for and representing transcendent spirituality. Number 19. There's a turn to nature, drawing on the natural resources from without in nature and also within, as in the nature of humans. Loie Fuller's work was inspired by nature, as was Isadora Duncan and Catherine Dunham. She really melded the concept of function and form and how they travel together in terms of the function of nature within ourselves and the form that we take to explore it. Doris Humphrey's water study, choreographed in 1928. Humphrey's choreography began with experiments in dance theory, and as an attempt to reduce dance to pure movement, water study is an example of that. It incorporated her theory of fall and recovery and used only non-musical rhythms, waves, and natural human breath, and pulse rhythms. This was the first dance that I learned of the great moderns. I learned this, I think, in freshman year in high school, water study, 1928. Number 20, the expression of self in relationship to the rest of humanity. All you have to do is look at this picture of this Martha Graham dance, and you can see the point that she's making. She's individual. She stands out. In some ways, she is either a leader in the community or she is being traumatized by the community, as we see in another dance further on, Heretic. Here she is in, I believe this is one of Ted Shawn's pieces. It could also be an early Martha Graham piece. Dance as a therapeutic tool fits into this category. Number 20, expression of self in the relationship to humanity. Discussed during the anthropology unit of class, cultures all over the world have relied on dance to convey emotion, tell stories, communicate with each other and the supernatural, and to treat illness. Think back to the Ojibwe jingle dance of the Wichipi film that we saw. Individuals embraced movement and song as a therapeutic experience. Healers employed its movements as an intrinsic accompaniment to the ritual of healing. The power of dance to communicate, express, and restore underlies the ability of dance therapy to heal from centuries ago all the way to this day. Modern dance therapy, also called dance movement theory, finds its origins with modern dance pioneers like Isadora Duncan, Martha Graham, Pearl Primus, Mary Vigman, and Doris Humphrey, but becomes an institution on its own right with several people. Marion Chase, who had danced with the Denishon and toured in the vaudeville circuit with them for about 5 years, turned her career to dance as a dance instructor. When she did that, she noticed that for some of her students, dance was an emotional outlet for feelings they needed to express, not just a series of movements or a sense of expressing artistically. In World War II, the work of psychoanalytic pioneers like Freud and Jung influenced the dance therapy movement. One of them was Mary Stark's White House. I don't have a picture of her here, but she would become a Jungian analyst and really develop a process called movement in depth. Now, Marion Chase is known for creating the American Dance Therapy, or founding the American Dance Therapy Association in 1966 with other dance therapists. Trudy Shoup, who was born in Europe, danced professionally. She was actually a comedy performer, movement comedy performer. And she began to use dance as a therapeutic tool, working with schizophrenics who were in New York hospitals. They were hospitalized. Anna Halperin, who is a major San Francisco or Bay Area icon, became very ill at one point in her life and used movement to help her deal with and heal her body. She then opened up an institute called the Tamalapa Institute and began to work with individuals who were very, very, very ill. I've taken several different workshops from Anna Halperin, and Trudy Shoup was my mentor from afar when I was a dance therapist. That was my first paid job. I was dancing professionally, but that's not how you make your money. It's not how you pay rent at the time that I was dancing. I paid my rent through being a dance therapist, working in the Minneapolis and St. Paul school systems. 21. Great dance function follows great dance form. Here we have Martha Graham proving that non-ballet technique can produce strong dancers and who could communicate intense feelings. Not only is that true with Martha Graham, it was true with Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman, and also Catherine Dunham. Expansion, number 22, expansion of the definition of feeling states. When we talk about feelings, we think happy, sad, mad, glad. But Suzanne Langer, that's Suzanne Langer, S-U-Z-A-N-N-E, Langer, L-A-N-G-E-R, expands that concept. She writes, everything can be felt, from physical sensation, pain and comfort, excitement and repose, to complex emotions, intellectual tensions, or the steady feeling tones of conscious life. Pearl Primus expanded feeling states in her choreography. She provided a platform for African Americans to demonstrate feelings of righteous indignation, joyful sensuality with self, pain, integrity, and love. Number 23, abstraction, range of abstraction. Here we have in modern dance a range of that will lead from something that's very, very literal, a literal story. You can see it. It follows in a linear path. There's tons of detail in the story. It's very objective, and it follows conventional reality, all the way over to something that is very metaphorical, very figurative, multidimensional, almost in some ways esoteric. It's abbreviated, subjective. It's an idiosyncratic account. The more you travel to the right on the scale, the more abstract a piece of art or dance is going to seem. And there's a whole series of modern dancers who are going to be more or less abstract in their work. As I continue on through Martha Graham and Mary Wigman, we're going to see abstraction increase. And of course, in the Ballet Russe, Sergei Diaghilev, we're going to bring this abstraction into ballet, and it's going to be completely fleshed out with people like George Balanchine. But as we continue with Ted Shawn and Lester Horton, Helen Tamiris, Paul Negrin, Paul Taylor, and his work, actually Esplanade, that was one of his signature pieces, Twyla Tharp, we see that, actually, let me go back to Twyla Tharp. If we looked at Twyla Tharp, she can really range. Think about Catherine Wheel that she choreographed, and then moving out, Amadeus, Hair. So some of her work can be very literal and with a little bit of abstraction, and some of it can be extraordinary abstract. She has a wide range. In many ways, so does Paul Taylor. Garth Fagan also has a wide range that leads into abstraction. Alwyn Nicolai with Murray Lewis also. And of course, John Cage and Merce Cunningham. Made it to the end of this one. Okay, there's only one more left. Take care.